Today, we are unpacking the epic, completely dramatic life cycle of the British Empire. We're pulling straight from the historical documents to figure out exactly how a tiny, seemingly unassuming island managed to achieve absolute world domination. Let's just dive right into it.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the story we're about to explore, you just need to conceptualize this time frame. 4 centuries. We're talking 400 years of relentless, world-altering expansion. This wasn't some fleeting moment or an overnight conquest. It was a massive, multi-generational machine. And keeping that enormous timeline in mind is absolutely crucial as we look at the facts today.
So, Part 1. The Empire's English Foundations. The foundations for this incredibly sprawling empire started out pretty modestly, right on the lands of England. It didn't just explode into a global phenomenon out of nowhere. Instead, a highly ambitious British monarchy, especially around the Tudor period, started investing heavily in maritime tech, and that really ignited this extraordinary era. It's kind of wild to think that this massive global structure traces all the way back to just one concentrated point of royal power.
Moving on to Part 2, venturing across the oceans.
So, following the discovery of the Americas about 500 years ago, a major switch was flipped. The British aggressively ventured out into completely unknown oceans. And those initial steps? Well, over the subsequent decades, they compounded. It set off this massive chain reaction, establishing a network of global dominance piece by piece over the next 4 centuries.
And as they pushed further out, they obviously bumped into new civilizations and rival European powers. The results were deeply, deeply complex. On one hand, they formed these historic embedded trade partnerships, but on the other, they sparked some absolutely fierce historic rivalries. Think Spain, think France. The world was rapidly shrinking, and these massive global collisions really laid the complicated diplomatic groundwork for the modern world we live in today. Which brings us to Part 3, a quarter of the Earth.
This is where the numbers get truly mind-boggling. This single European empire would eventually take over a staggering 25% of the entire planet's land and population. Let that sink in. 1 in every 4 human beings on Earth, and a quarter of all the land mass, fell under the direct control of an empire that started on that tiny island. It is literally an unparalleled statistic in human history. And of course, land and population inevitably translate into wealth. Within those 4 centuries of relentless expansion, the empire's total value skyrocketed to over $600 billion. A lot of this was driven by massive state-sponsored monopolies, like the famous East India Company, and intense resource extraction. Basically, this was the economic engine that funded the industrialization of the modern world. To put that $600 billion into perspective, we just need to map out their astonishing territorial reach. They owned parts of the Americas, stretched across the vast expanses of Asia, went right down through the continent of Africa, and even reached all the way to Australia. This wasn't just some regional trade network. This was a highly optimized, truly intercontinental machine. Now, as an objective explainer, it's absolutely crucial we look at the intensely dual legacy this left behind. On one side of the coin, the empire witnessed some of the greatest stories of human achievement, massive industrial innovation and technological triumph. But in that exact same historical breath, it produced the absolute worst sides of humanity. We're talking extreme exploitation, massive displacement, and the horrific realities of the global slave trade. To really grasp this history, we have to hold both of those profound, contradictory realities in our minds at once. Finally, we reach Part 4, the empire's eventual end. Because, nothing lasts forever. Not even an empire of this magnitude. Looking at this incredible trajectory, from those humble English foundations to owning a quarter of the globe and generating $600 billion, it leaves us with one massive, lingering historical puzzle. How on earth did an empire of this unparalleled global scale, one that owned parts of the Americas, Asia, Africa, and even Australia, eventually collapse? That is the provocative question I want you to chew on today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and never stop seeking clear, objective understanding.